One of the hard things about the teachings of Jesus is his insistence that our lives as leaders in the church are not promised to be a bed of roses. Our faith, our commitments, our godly lifestyles do not make us immune to life's struggles and all kinds of challenges, even outright attack. On the contrary, Jesus promised us that we will face opposition in the same way he did. He said in John, "If they hate you, keep in mind that they hated me first. If they persecute me, they will persecute you also." Friends, Jesus' life was filled with opposition. The religious leaders of the day tried to destroy him. His disciples were constantly bickering amongst themselves and jockeying for power around him. Jesus lived with almost constant political and interpersonal conflict. And as Jesus told us, no servant's greater than his master. If it was true for him, it will be true for us too. But remember, it's important to be aware that our enemy is more than just politics and interpersonal conflict. You are also in a spiritual battle. Peter warns us in his first epistle to be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, Peter says. Stand firm in your faith. And Paul charges us to be dressed in armor, to get ready for battle every day, so that we may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. It's interesting that the first piece of armor Paul mentions in Ephesians is the belt of truth. I think that's because the way the enemy attacks is usually through deceit. I've seen more leaders derailed by lies, friends, than I've seen them taken out by tragedy, difficulty, illness, or even pain. In my life and ministry, I've experienced what you might call direct attacks. I've been mocked for my faith, run out of town by a gang throwing rocks because I shared my faith. I've suffered grave illness and even plane crash. All of those events were far easier to face than the slow, persistent lies of the devil. And this is what they sound like in my life. You are alone. You are not enough. You are unlovable. You are forsaken. This is what warfare looks like for me over the last 40 years. I've come to learn that I'm not unique in it, though. Most of us are deeply susceptible to these kinds of lies, or their many variations. Spiritual warfare is simply a cost of doing ministry. It's going to happen to you. We cannot avoid it. But we can avoid the pitfalls. We can avoid succumbing to the lies. Let me share 3 essentials that I think will help you. First, I want you to learn from the life of Moses. When he was at his lowest, when the grumbling and complaining of the people were at its worst, Moses sought the presence of God in the tent of meeting. We cannot survive the warfare apart from the presence of God in our lives. Now, the most encouraging thing I say about God's presence is that God's commitment to being with you is far greater than your commitment or strength to be with him. God's presence in your life depends less on us than it does in the love, the faithfulness, and tenacity of Jesus. God's with you. Now, second, I want you to learn from David. And David did constant battle in the face of people and situations telling him that he was foolish, hopeless, and abandoned by God. His greatest weapon in the fight was his praise of God. David worshiped. He sang and said and danced the truth of God's character, God's purpose, God's power, and God's mercy. Praise and worship were his means of rooting himself in truth. And third, I want you to learn from Elijah. Remember the story from Kings. He had just defeated the prophets of Baal, soaked his altar in water, and God still came and consumed it in fire. Yet he's dejected, feels all alone, wrongly believes he's the only faithful one left. And God's gentle with him. He feeds him with birds, puts him to sleep, and then he shows up for him. Elijah gets to experience God's presence in the still, small whisper. All of that's amazing. But that's not all. The next thing that happens is God gave Elijah a partner and friend in Elisha. And he's like a flesh and blood reminder to Elijah that he's not alone, that the lies of the evil one are not true. Sometimes what we need more than anything else in life is partnership, people to whom we can tell the truth and even speak the lies out loud. True partnership brings lies into the light, because it's hard for lies to endure the brightness of true love and community. Your battle with the evil one is real. You're being lied to all day, every day. And the battle against the deceit of the devil is won through the presence of God, the practice of the praise of God, and the gift of the people of God. What is your next step today in this battle? What is God inviting you to do to push back the lies and the darkness? May God give you clarity, hope, and resolve in the spiritual warfare you encounter today. And remember, you are not alone.